Okay, so for the third video, I'm actually taking one of my studies that I created an instrument, and in order to create an instrument to validate it, if you want to normalize it relative to a large population, you need about 1,000 participants. So this actually took me about a year to do, and I have 1,076 participants. Yes, I'm nuts. But that's not the purpose here. I just figured I'd march you through it. Anything that says Dan is a play on words. My name is Dan, but it actually stands for Drug, Alcohol, and Nicotine Scale. So it's a Drug, Alcohol, and Nicotine Scale. It has 14 items and it has many subscales. And then I wanted to look at other mental health factors, correlates with substance use and so forth. I have another instrument that measures substance abuse called the DUDIT, Drug Use Disorders Identification Test. And then I measured spiritual intelligence. I measured depression, which is the PHQ. I measured spiritual experiences, which actually measures religiosity. I measured anxiety, and I measured social desirability with the Marlowe Crown, and then a whole bunch of demographics items. So that's a very quick primer. But let's say I'm going to go into data view, and just to give you an idea, I'm scrolling down. Imagine you had to do all of this and you had to run through this. It would be a long amount of time to get numbers. So let's say I wanted to, and in this video, pardon me, I decided to do 4 videos, not 3. But in this video, all I'm going to teach you is how to compute variables and recode variables. So again, if you have 1,000 participants, you're not going to want to have to manually add up every item of a scale. That will take forever. So thank goodness for us, if you go to the Transform tab, right? So the Transform tab, and you click that, there's a bunch of options. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to click Compute Variable. Now, again, remember in the previous video, when you name a variable, it can only be one word or an underscore. So I'm going to call this Dan Total Demo, right? So that's 3 words. So I can't really, I can't do the space bar. So I'm going to call it DAN Total Demo. Right? Because I actually already did it with this SPSS file. So I'm doing this as a demo. So now, whenever I'm done doing whatever I'm telling it to do, I will have a column called Dan Total Demo. And I'm going to show you that. But let's say I wanted to know your general total score for drugs and alcohol use altogether. So I would want to add up all 14 of the items on the Dan scale. Right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click nicotine, see the arrow, press it, it's going to show up as Dan1 plus caffeine, arrow, plus, and I'm going to do this for the rest of these. I'm not going to keep stating it. But when I get all 14 in, I'm going to give it a command, and then what's going to happen is I'm going to get an output file and a column, and I'm going to take you through each. Now most people ignore some of the syntax in the output file, but I actually think that's a mistake, because if you want to reproduce things for another study, you can copy and paste that syntax, which is not necessarily for this video, but your professor will tell you more about that. Okay, so now I have all 14 of my items. I always do another scan through to make sure that I have Dan1 all the way through Dan 14. So you'll notice the numerical expression. What I'm telling SPSS to do is add up all 14 of these items and put it into its own column. So now that I have it all there and it looks good, I'm going to go to the bottom right and click OK. And as I mentioned, this is your output. Similar to the previous video when we had the frequency distributions and the tables, this here is your syntax. So now I could look at this and say, hey, this looks a little funny. I could look at this and see, did it add up everything? Now in this case it was right, it did what it was supposed to, but it's saying compute the following variable called Dan total demo, and the items that it's adding up to compute it are listed. So I'm going to go back into my SPSS file, and I'm going to scroll to the right of all my variables, and the hope is that we will have a column. Now I'm going to go back to the top because I scrolled down to show you that I have a bunch of items or participants. Now, here we have it. So for participant 1, it's saying that if I add up items 1 through 14, the profile score is 8. Now let's go back and double check that. I'm going to go all the way back, and I'm sorry for the time it takes, but just to fact check ourselves, it's good to do this. So 0 plus 7, 7, 0, still 7, still 7, still 7, 8, still 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 8. So when I go all the way to the end, I got to 8. Now imagine having to add these up manually for 1,000 participants. I keep repeating myself to impress upon you how important the compute variable is, because it saves you a lot of time. What would take you hours to do is actually done in a click of a button in about a minute. Now I'm going to go back and check the next one. So the next one, if I add up all of them, it should be 29, and I'm only going to do 2 of them to show you. So let's see if that works out. Going back to the Dan items all the way on the left side of the table. Okay, so 8 plus 7 is 15, 16, 17, 20, 27, 29, and then I got to, so it should be 29, and what did we say it was supposed to be? It was supposed to be 29, and let's just go back. All right, so the idea of computing, see 29, the idea of computing a variable is to actually save you time. It's highly efficient. Now, aside from computing variables, we might want to recode a variable. Now, some surveys will phrase questions very straightforward, but sometimes you want to catch people if they're lying, right? So sometimes an instrument will intentionally ask it in the opposite. So what they do is they phrase it in a negative wording, so now you have to recode it. Now for this, one of the items you'll notice is the spiritual intelligence item 1. Item number 6 is written in a way that is in a negative form, so stronger agreement actually means less agreement or lower levels of spiritual intelligence. So what I'm going to do the same demo, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this and I'm going to recode the variable. So I'm going to go to transform, and I'm going to transform and recode it into different variables. So I already did it. If you look at next to the Dan total demo, it's there, but I'm going to do it again just to show you how I got that. So I'm going to click recode into different variable. So I'm going to go down to my SIS3 item number 6. I'm going to put that as my input variable. Now when you put that in, you'll see there's a question mark. That's because we didn't call our output yet. We didn't label it yet. So we're going to call this SIS3 underscore reverse underscore demo. So what I'm noting this, SIS3 6, because it's item number 6. So I'm taking that number 6, and whatever the previous numbers were, I'm flipping it to the opposite. Now just to give you an idea of the level of support, in the SIS3 it goes from 0 to 4, right? So I'm going to click change, and then I'm going to go into where it says in the middle of the box, old and new values. So if it goes from 0 to 4, a 0 actually should be a 4. And then a 1 should be a 3. A 2 remains a 2. Again, it's 5-point Likert scale. A 3 becomes a 1, and then a 4 becomes a 0. Okay. Now, you'll notice if you go the old values, it's going from 0 to 4 down, right? 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. The new values go 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. So this is what we call reverse coding. Now, imagine you had to toggle back and forth like I did with the Dan total and counting them. It takes a lot of time, but SPSS will do this for you, right? Save you a lot of time. I'm going to click continue, and hopefully it does what it's supposed to. So again, you'll notice the output pops up. And in this case, we're not computing a variable, we're recoding a variable. So whenever the previous number started out as 0, we're telling you to make it a 4. 1, make it a 3. 2, keep it a 2. 3, make it a 1. 4, make it a 0. Now let's go back into the data file and see if that worked out for us. So what's cool is you actually have the previous one where I did it outside of this video and me doing it again, and the numbers match, right? Because, right, this is 3, this is 3. Now, this was already reverse coded. Now, if the reverse coded was a 3, I know that the original number was a 1. So let's go to Sys3, scroll back, and see that it was indeed a 1. Sys3 number 6. Give me some time. Sure enough, look, it's a 1. Right? So I said make all 1s 3s, right? And so forth. Now I'm going to randomly scroll down, play a little bit of fun with this. Now participant number 531, their original rating number was a 3. Reverse coded, it should be
1.
A 1. So let's hope that that is indeed the case as we scroll across. And sure enough, it's a 1. So the purpose of this video to remind you was just to tell you how to compute and recode variables. Because sometimes when you have large scales, they're going to tell you to get a total score. Sometimes they're going to tell you to get a mean score. And all of that can be done in the compute variable element. Sometimes, as I mentioned, they're going to have validity checks, or they're going to reverse code things. And that's where you have to recode into a different variable. Now, some people like to recode in the same variable, but I like to keep the old number there to fact check it like we did scrolling across. So I always do recode into different variable. So that's that. That's video number 3. It's pretty simple to compute variables, to recode variables. The one thing I didn't show you is how to calculate a mean score using compute variable, but it's the same way as doing a total one. But when you do all the adding, put it in parentheses and divide by the total numbers, right? Because how do you get a mean? You add up all the scores and then divide by the total number of scores. That would be the only difference in computing a variable. If you have a challenge with that, ask your instructor. It's pretty straightforward. Okay, so I'm going to stop the video here. And the last thing I'm going to show you is I'm going to show you the concept of an independent samples t-test. I'm going to show you an ANOVA. I'm going to show you correlation. And I'm going to show you chi-square. There are tons more statistical tests out there, but I'm going to show you these 4 because these are the most commonly used for. So I'm going to stop the video and then reintroduce myself soon.